I dreamed of going to Africa. Then, one day, it happened. To me, this is an enchanted forest. The Garden of Eden. If I could have just one wish, it would be to look out at the world through their eyes, to see what they see, to feel what they feel, even if only for a moment.
Stars across the heaven. There's the whispering sound of the wind in the grass. There's a rolling thunder across the savannah. I hope and a dream at the edge of the sky. And your life is a story like the wind. Your life is a story like the wind. I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart to hold and keep. For the spirit of the great heart under African sky. Sometimes I feel that you really know me. Sometimes there's so much you can show me. Oh, yo, yeah, oh, no, no, ma, yeah, oh, yo, yeah, oh, no, no, ma. I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart. I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart. I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart. I'm searching for the spirit of the great sun sinking low, scatterlings and fugitives, hooded eyes and weary brows seek refuge rooted one. On the road to Bellamanga, where the world began. I love the scatterings of Africa, each and every one. In their hearts a burning hunger, beneath the copper sun. Ancient bones from old divide, echoes of the very first cry. Who made me here and why? Beneath the copper sun. African idea, African idea. Make the future clear, make the future clear. And we are scatterings of Africa, both you and I. We run the road to Bellamanga, beneath the copper sky. And we are scatterings of Africa, on journey to the sky. Far below we live forever, dreams of what we were. Looks okay, the world survives into another day, and I'm thinking about eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. I had another dream about lions at the door. They weren't half as frightening as they were before, but I'm thinking about eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. Walls, windows, trees, waves coming through. You being me and I'll be in you, together in eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. Up among the firs where it smells so sweet, or down in the valley where the river used to be, I got my mind on eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me, and I'm wondering where the lions are. 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 Huge orange flying boat rises off a lake. 1,000-year-old petroglyphs doing a double take, pointing a finger at eternity. I'm sitting in the middle of this ecstasy. A young man marching, helmet shining in the sun, polished and precise like the brain behind the gun should be. They got me thinking about eternity, but some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. And I'm wondering where the lions are. 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 Freighters on the knot on the surface of the bay. One of these days we're gonna sail away, gonna sail into eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. And I'm wondering where the lions are. 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 I'm wondering where the lions are.
I dreamed of going to Africa. Then, one day, it happened. To me, this is an enchanted forest. The Garden of Eden. If I could have just one wish, it would be to look out at the world through their eyes, to see what they see, to feel what they feel, even if only for a moment.
There's a highway of stars across the heaven. There's the copper sun. African idea, African idea. Make the future clear, make the future clear. And we are scatterings of Africa, both you and I. We run the road to Belamamba, beneath the copper sky. And we are scatterings of Africa, journey to the sky. Far below we live forever, dreams of what we were.
Sun's up, looks okay. The world survives into another day, and I'm thinking about eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. I had another dream about lions at the door. They weren't half as frightening as they were before, but I'm thinking about eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. Walls, windows, trees, waves coming through. You being me and I'll be in you, together in eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. got my mind on eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me, and I'm wondering where the lions are. 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 Huge orange flying boat rises off a lake. 1,000-year-old petroglyphs doing a double take, pointing the finger at eternity. I'm sitting in the middle of this ecstasy. A young man marching, helmet shining in the sun, polished and precise like the brain behind the gun should be. They got me thinking about eternity, but some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. And I'm wondering where the lions are. 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 Freighters on the knot on the surface of the bay. One of these days we're gonna sail away, gonna sail into eternity. Some kind of ecstasy got a hold on me. And I'm wondering where the lions are. 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 I'm wondering w
The Global Thinkers series that FP does each year is perhaps the most prominent thing that we do. The events attract a lot of notice. The stuff we do on the web attracts a lot of notice. because we have focused ourselves as a media organization on the people and ideas that are changing the world. And so when you bring the people together with the ideas, you end up with the core of what we're about, but also some of the most compelling stories that exist in the world today. And the most compelling of those are the ones that are revealed in this Lifetime Achievement Award process, which we've just begun and we're extremely proud of. And one of the reasons we're pleased and proud to be undertaking this process is because we have such a great partner in AARP that has a special appreciation for it, and Deb in particular has a special appreciation for it. And so please join me in welcoming Deb Whitman, who will frame all of this for you.
Thank you, David, and thank you to Foreign Policy for being an incredible partner in our work together. The idea that AARP would be sponsoring a global Lifetime Achievement Award, maybe. All right, I will still talk. Let me just tell you why we're here. Across the globe, populations are growing up. By 2030. Foreign policy and David and his team on bringing the opportunity of global aging to the forefront of the global policy agenda. Right now, we're working together to take an in-depth look at how 12 countries are adapting to ensure that older adults get healthier, more productive, and engaged lives, and harness the benefits for their entire societies and economies. We'll be releasing these results at the OECD meeting in Paris this fall. But enough about us. Today we are here to honor James Goodall with the Global Thinkers Lifetime Achievement Award. At AARP, we believe there's great value in celebrating success at all points in life. And it is especially important that we honor those who continue to excel later in life. And that's why we're underwriting this award and shining a light on those who continue to contribute to make our world a better place and demonstrate that age and experience are not a barrier to success, but a bridge. In preparing for today, I came across a quote that I interviewed in 2015 with Dr. Goodall where she was asked about retirement. She said she would only retire when the world is safe. I don't think she will ever. And you also said that you hoped that your brain would still be working so that you could continue to write in certain societies. At AARP, we see from many people later in years are the most productive. And we've decided that we need to disrupt aging by challenging outdated beliefs to spark new solutions that we all can have. Dr. Goodall is a global leader.
stage, shall we? One more. I think he doesn't want it in front of your face. So, would you like to? Yes, sure, go there. Would you like your animals with you?
Better come this side, yes.
Yes, yeah, all right. I'm told there's a story. These aren't mine. Okay, there you go. Now, because you have them with you, I can hardly begin without asking what the story is.
Well, there's several stories.
All right.
Let's start talking, and then I'll bring
You're
them
going to use them as props as we
yeah,
go?
they are. That's right.
All right.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what I say that makes her hold up a rat. But, well, you know, I actually sort of wanted to begin in an offbeat place. You know, these conversations that we have, we like to focus on the future and what the conclusions and that you've drawn from your work might suggest about the future and the times we live in. But I would like to sort of begin in a kind of in a different direction. Because as I've followed your career and read about your work, one of the things that has struck me most is almost metaphysical. It has to do with the fact that from the very beginnings, your work has explored what was once a very bright line between human beings and animals, and has broken down that line, and has essentially said, we are much closer than we thought, and we have much to learn. And in fact, Carla, who you've met, who's my fiance, and who we were discussing this, often will say animals are her teachers. And it seemed to me in some respects that in your work, you've found that as well. Am I misreading it?
Oh, absolutely correct. And you know, when I'd been in the field for 2 years, and Louis Leakey, my mentor, although he never came to Gombe, but he sent me there and he found the money for me to go. And after 2 years, he said, Jane, I won't always be here to get money for you, and you'll need a degree. Well, I'd never been to college. And he said, we haven't got time for you to do a BA. You'll have to go straight for a PhD, and I've got you a position to do a PhD in ethology at Cambridge University. Well, I didn't know what ethology was. So I was a bit nervous when I got there, only to be told by these professors, of whom I was in awe, that I'd done it all wrong. I shouldn't have given the chimpanzees names. They should have had numbers. I couldn't talk about them having personalities, minds capable of thinking, nor certainly emotions, happiness, sadness, fear, and so on. But I'd had this wonderful teacher when I was a child, and he taught me that for all their erudite knowledge, in this respect, they were wrong, and that was my dog, Rusty. So you cannot share your life in a meaningful way with any animal, a dog, a cat, a horse, a cow, a pig, a bird, and not know the professors were wrong. And you know, I think they knew it too, only in science you must be able to prove everything, and they couldn't prove it. Therefore, it didn't exist, or at least you couldn't talk about it.
So you got your BA at the University of Rusty.
That's right.
But, you know, it also seems to me to some extent that you got it, there was some good fortune. You know, again, I was reading some articles about you as I was preparing for this, and, you know, you had saved money and you prepared to go off to Africa and you mislaid your passport. And fortunately, somebody had found it and brought it to you. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened. But you also then went off into the wild after Louis Leakey had set this up, and you encountered a chimpanzee very early on who you named David Graybeard. And he began to accept you. And if you'd encountered a different chimpanzee, it just struck me that the story might have turned out differently.
Well, David was part of a community, and the big problem was that they all ran away. They'd never seen a white ape before, and I was a white ape. we are apes. We are the 5th grade ape. And, you know.
Some of us in Washington, not so great.
Well, we talk about orangutans there, don't we?
Yes, yes. Oh, nice. Very nice. If you haven't picked that up, write it down and think about it later. Yeah, very, very good.
Oh, I'm so naughty. Anyway, so anyway, this white ape was very frightening for the chimps, who are very conservative, and they would run away. And then this one, we don't know why, but they're all different. They all have their own personalities, and this one very handsome, and they, you know, they're not all handsome, and he had this beautiful white beard, and I don't know why David, but his best friend became Goliath, so it was David and Goliath. David Greybeard. I'm reminded one of my very oldest friends in this room is David Shear, who was chairman of JGI for many years, and he is David Greybeard personified. At any rate.
Very glad that I, as another David, don't fall into that category. Well, because of my youthful appearance.
Well, it's because you shave.
I was warned about this. Yeah, go on.
Well, anyway, so David, for some reason, began to lose his fear. And then then he came to my camp to eat palm nuts. There was a tree that ripened. And one day he found some bananas and took them. So I asked my cook to put bananas out. I was up in the hills every morning and eventually stayed to see who was this chimp coming in and taking bananas. And it was David Greybeard. And that, of course, made him even more accepting of my presence. So when I came upon David in the forest with a group of other chimps, they were ready to run away. But if he was there sitting calmly, even approaching as opposed to see if I had a banana, they would look from him to me and back. And they must have thought, well, she can't be so dangerous after all. And so gradually, it was like an introduction to his friends in the forest. Goliath, whom I came to understand was the top-ranking or alpha male, and timid William, and then the matriarch Flo, who must have been at that time at least 50 years old, if not older, teeth down, worn to the gums, but still a wonderful mother, still fertile. And I learned a lot about mothering from her, and gradually met all the others at 50 in one community.
Now, was Flo the one who had all these children that you gave names that began with F?
Yes, all the Flo family, Flo and her daughters and her grandchildren, and finally her great-grandchildren, although by that time she's gone. They can live to be, the oldest in captivity is 74, 75. Interesting, this oldest lady, she's in Florida, which is where a lot of elderly people go. Anyway, she's wonderful, little mama. But in the wild, we think it's rare to live up to 60 because, teeth get worn and there's more disease and internal parasites.
But, it seems that David Greybeard and a few of these others essentially became co-authors and introduced you to the world that then you introduced the world to.
Yeah, well, they certainly were my guides. They led me into their world.
But when one reads your work, the conclusion you come away is that to give numbers to animals that have such rich personalities would be actually a grievous mistake.
Of course it would be a mistake. I mean, we don't give our dogs numbers, do we? And the sad thing is when we number animals, we belittle them, we turn them into mere things. And when we turn them into things, we do unspeakable things to them.
It reminds me, and this may seem off the point, but I actually don't think it is, that until the 70s in Australia, Aboriginal people were categorized as fauna. And it allowed Australian colonists to treat them in an abhorrent way because they were classified down as animals.
Think of the Holocaust. Every Jew was numbered on their chest. Laboratory chimps are numbered. I mean, fortunately, NIH has released them from the labs now, but they still have their numbers.
Well, it raises an interesting point, which, again, this is the metaphysical, and I'll move on to the policy. These are Washington types, and they get very uncomfortable when you get metaphysical. They prefer policy talk. You're more spiritual group we have here than usual.
Otherwise, they're more like scientists.
The more, yeah, right. But suggests that to the extent that something like a soul exists, it exists also within these creatures, and that I'm just wondering. I don't want to pry into your innermost thoughts on spirituality, but have you grappled with that? Have you thought about that issue?
I've thought about it ever since the Holocaust, and I have been thinking of it ever since. And recently, and this is, first of all, I found a great sense of a spiritual power when I was out in the forest, where everything is interconnected. And that's when I came to the conclusion, as you just said, that if I have a soul, then these other creatures have a soul. And it's like a little spark of that great spiritual power. And, if you have it, then so does the chimpanzee. And I sometimes wondered about the trees as well, every living thing. But what's really fascinating, the director of NIH, Francis Collins, who you probably know.
Yeah, yes.
Have you read his book, The Language of God? Well, this is the most fascinating book. This is the man who led the team that unraveled the human genome. And he said he began as an agnostic, but the more he contemplated the amazing chemistry and design behind the structure of every single cell in our bodies, the more he realized that this couldn't possibly be by chance. It's a fascinating book. So he became a believer because of his science.
Well, I bring it up not simply because I think it's a compelling idea. It's the foundation of some religions. Hinduism, Buddhism, all believe in that there is a kind of a great connectedness, and we're all part of one thing, and that the more you realize that, the more it changes your behavior. And of course, you can walk through a street in India, as I did not so long ago, and there are cows walking in the streets and other things because of this sense of the connectedness. The flip side is that if you don't see that connectedness, then you can abuse what's around you. And it seems to me that not only have human beings done that for a long time, but that we are at a pivotal moment with regard to, our civilizational views towards this issue right now. And that it's the lack of seeing the wholeness that puts us at risk of destroying its component parts.
I think we've harmed this planet most grievously. And things aren't looking very good in many countries today about our leaders' attitude towards the environment. And the reason I began our program for young people, which we call Roots and Shoots, was because I kept meeting young people, high school students, university students, who basically were mostly apathetic, not seeming to care much. Some of them were really depressed, some of them were angry, even violent, and all of them, when I talked to them, said more or less the same: well, you've compromised our future, and there's nothing we can do about it. So we have, and you keep hearing this expression, we haven't inherited this planet from our parents, we borrowed it from our children. And that's wrong. We haven't borrowed from our children, we've stolen. And we're still stealing. And, now we're told that jobs and the economic development of America are more important than the environment. So that's betraying the future yet again for our children. And, but I still believe we have this window of time. Maybe it's wishful thinking, I don't know, but I choose to believe that there's a window of time when we can get together and start putting things right. And we owe it to our children. If we don't try, we shouldn't have any children. And so Roots and Shoots, which began with 12 high school students in Tanzania in 91, is now in 98 countries. We have about 1,500 150,000 active groups, ages kindergarten through university. And interestingly, talking about aging, we've just started pushing it into for older people. And I just was in Chengdu in China, and here was this group of retired people, and they'd started a Roots and Shoots program, which is choosing projects to make the world better, one to help people, one to help other animals, one to help the environment. And they said that since they began taking action like this, they now felt that their lives were useful and they wanted to go on living. Before, they just wanted to give up.
I think that's a very powerful idea. And I look at, as I look sort of out to Deb and the AARP conversation, one of the things they've taught me is that if you see a 10-year-old American child today, there's a 50% chance that that child will live to be over 100 years old. And so the question is, what do we do with our whole lives? And there are these groups of people who are somewhat older, who have all the experience in the world, have the ability now of technology to utilize that, who might be an army of activists that never existed before.
And how, the indigenous people revere their elders. They don't throw them away into retirement homes. They revere them, listen to them. And that's one thing for our young Roots and Shoots members, to go and talk to old people and hear their stories. Hear the stories of what it was like 50 years ago, 60 years ago. I can talk about what it was like 70 years ago. I can't remember much before that, but I can certainly remember when I was 10.
Well, that's an enormous gift, and it used to matter that you couldn't tote a barge or lift a bale, but now in the information age, having 70 years of experience plus all the tools of technology is very powerful.
And I can talk to children and their eyes get very wide and say, when I was your age, these are 10, 12-year-olds, there wasn't any television. There weren't planes flying people back and forth. We traveled by boat. You couldn't Google anything. If you wanted to get a message quickly, you had to do a telegram. And then faxes came in. No, telex is next. So I've seen so much change. I started my notes handwritten, and that's how we wrote mostly to each other by letters. And then I got this old typewriter, like this. And eventually somebody persuaded me to go to an electric typewriter.
Big innovation.
Now we have laptops and iPads and things like that.
So all those technologies are coming to places like Africa, where you've been working. And in many countries in Africa, cell phone penetration is approaching 100%. And this is transformational. We're a few years away from the first moment in the history of the world when every person is connected in a man-made system, because we'll all be connected in this internet system. And there are many positive changes associated with that. But one of the things we've learned from technological revolution is, as many positive changes as are associated with any breakthrough, there are also risks. And as you look at the area that you've spent so much time in Africa, and you see the changes that are coming, what worries you the most? What are the greatest risks that you see looming?
Well, the greatest risks for chimpanzees, and of course all the other creatures that share their environment, is the destruction of the forest. And that is partly due to human population growth. It's due to the demand for more and more meat, so cattle are moving into the forests and turning them gradually into woodlands, because they eat all the young plants and eventually it becomes eroded and desertified. And forests are disappearing, of course, because of the big timber companies. Huge areas cleared. Now the big danger is the oil palms, and that's particularly in Asia and in Indonesia and Malaysia, but it's now moved into Latin America and it's now sweeping into Africa. And so whole forests being destroyed for these monocultures. And along with the destruction of the forest, all of this amazing biodiversity of life, this interconnected ecosystem, is gone.
It reminds me, as I listen to you talk, that at some point in this process, you became a vegetarian. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that, because I
This
think
is
it's
where
time.
cow comes in.
I was like sitting here going, am I going to ever figure out a way to get these stuffed animals into this conversation?
Well, cow was given to me. We can't see at the back very well, but silly little stuffed toy, and I was going to give her away. And then I thought, no, cow can help me. So when I'm told, people say, why are you a vegetarian? Well, I became a vegetarian because I started to understand about animal factory farming and the cruelty and the abuse. But now it's not just that. Some people don't seem to care. Although cows all have their own personality, and they're actually amazing creatures. But
Have you spent much time with cows?
Yes, I have. I used to be able to milk them. I probably still could,
But you just haven't tried recently.
Well, there's not really many cows to try to milk. They're all in these awful places. Anyway, never mind about that. But we also know that as more and more people around the world eat more and more meat, it becomes a status symbol. And so more, billions of animals, cows, pigs, chickens, turkeys, sheep, they're all being raised for food in these horrible conditions. They all have to feed. So more and more grain is grown. So forests are cut down to grow the grain. And huge amounts of fossil fuel are used. And this is used to transport the grain to the animals to the abattoir, and the meat to the table. And in addition to that, it takes an enormous amount of water to change plant protein into animal protein. And then this is why I carry cow around, especially when I'm talking to kids, because it's a bit of a serious subject, but you can say food goes in here and gas comes out the other end. And that happens to be methane, which happens to be a very, very virulent greenhouse gas. Of course, carbon dioxide is the most frequent one. And they produce all this methane. If you don't care about the environment and you don't care about the animal welfare, you probably care about your own health. And it's the misuse of antibiotics in keeping these poor animals alive, never mind if they're sick or not. They just routinely give them antibiotics. And so the bacteria are building up resistance. And so we get these superbugs, these bugs that are resistant to antibiotics. And I happened to be in England, I think it was 2 years ago, possibly 2, maybe 3, when the Surgeon General said, the era of the antibiotic is almost over, and a great deal of the problem is caused by modern animal agriculture.
This sounds a lot like science to me. And here in Washington, we're not so sure about science.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah. These are, we live in an era where people can actually appear on television and say, well, this climate change thing, it's just a theory.
Just a theory. We can tweet it too, right?
Right. We could
That's
tweet it.
the preferred way these days.
Among some. I think by the end of this conversation, you're going to take back your orangutan remark as being unfair to orangutans.
I've already said that. I've already said that.
Well, but I do think that this kind of war on science is a very, very serious problem. And we can joke about it because to most of us it may seem ludicrous, but clearly to a large enough group of people, it is not ludicrous. They buy it because it suits them. It suits their corporate strategy, or it suits their ideological position. And we have some of the people, including not so far from here, theoretically the most powerful person in the world, saying this is just a theory, or vaccines, they cause problems. They don't actually help with health.
But in climate change, it's a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese in order to make their products more profitable than the American ones, because poor old Americans won't be able to do anything because of all these terrible laws put in place by previous administrations that we must now immediately overturn to open up jobs for miners, coal miners.
What's your reaction to that viscerally?
Viscerally, it makes me feel sick. I mean, all the work that's been done to try and protect future generations, just signing a piece of paper, turning it on its head. Don't we care about our children? Don't they care about their children? Are they really not understanding, or are they simply saying that in order to boost their political image among their constituents?
Now, by the way, in a moment, I'm going to go ask for questions from all of you. And so I'm saying that, by the way, as a warning to somebody to get a microphone, so we're actually able to do that. But before we get to that, you travel incessantly, 300 days a year, you're out there. 300 days a year, you're having conversations, presumably, that touch at least tangentially upon these issues.
Oh, yeah.
As you go around the world, what is your sense of the global perception of this kind of war on science and pushback on established facts?
People are shocked, dismayed. I was in Hong Kong when the news of the election came through, and there was complete shock. And when I heard it, I just landed, and I said, no, it can't be true. But it was, and everybody, of course, I only know a certain level of people who would come to my talks and things. They're all feeling exactly the same as I presume everybody in this room.
Well, as I look out at this room, they do seem a little queasy. And I think that's possibly because of this subject and how uncomfortable it is. And because how much so many of these people want to be able to do what they can to help advance the ideas that you've spent your life working on. Before we get to the question, you've got a variety of different programs that you've been advocating that advance these issues. Could you talk about those for a second, and then we'll get to some questions?
Yeah, well, I think I'll lead into it by saying, after I got my PhD, I went back to Gombe, built up a research station. Students were coming, studying different aspects of chimp behavior. I had time out in the forest. I had a little boy by that time. I had time to analyze data. I had time to write. They were the best days of my life, no question. And then at a conference in Chicago in 1986, we had a session where there was a conference bringing all the people studying chimpanzees together from different parts of Africa. By then, I think there were 7 study sites. And we had a session on conservation that was shocking. And we had a session on conditions in medical research, secretly filmed footage, which gave me nightmares for weeks. So I went to that conference as a scientist. I left as an activist. And it was since then, October 86, that I haven't been more than 3 weeks in any one place. I knew I had to do something. I did not know what to do. So I went round Africa to learn more about the situation. And I did learn a lot about the plight facing chimps, the beginning of the bushmeat trade, that's the commercial hunting of wild animals for food, the live animal trade, shooting the mother to sell the infant for zoos, circuses, in those days, medical research, risks from human health as people push further into the forest, chimps caught in snares. So I learned about all that. But I also learned about the problems facing the people living in and around chimp habitat. The crippling poverty, the lack of health and education facilities, the ethnic violence, already some competition for natural resources. And it came to a head when I flew over the Little Gombe National Park, where our study is still going on, by the way. It's now 56 years old, and we're still learning new things about the chimps. But anyway, when I first arrived in 1960, Gombe was part of the equatorial forest belt that curled right round, went over to the west coast. And it's in Tanzania, by the way. And when I flew over in 1991, Gombe was a little island, a forest surrounded by completely bare hills. I knew there was deforestation. I was not prepared for the shock of what I saw. And that's when it hit me. If we don't do something to improve the lives of these people, then we can't even try to save the chimps. There were too many people for the land to support, too poor to buy food from elsewhere. Of course, they were cutting the last trees to try and grow food or make charcoal because they had to in their struggle to survive. So that's when the Jane Goodall Institute, JGI, we began Take Care, or we call it Tokari, our program, which began with 12 villages around Gombe, very holistic, not marching in as a bunch of arrogant white people, well, we'll help you to live better lives. No, a Tanzanian team sitting quietly with the villagers, asking them what they thought we could do for them, and starting with what they wanted. Growing more food, restoring fertility to the land, no chemicals used, of course, by the way. And then moving on, one of our, I think, most important interventions was microcredit for groups of women based on Muhammad Yunus's bank. He's one of my true heroes. He started the cell phones out in the villages. And so this program is now in 52 villages around Gombe and down south. It's used to restore the forests around Gombe because the people, now they trust us, have made land use management plans, and they've set land aside around Gombe as a buffer. They understand the value of like shade-grown coffee, letting the trees grow back, that it provides shade, it provides stability of soil on these steep slopes. In the south of Tanzania, most of the wild chimps still live, and they're not in a protected area, they're in village forest reserves. So we use the same program there to protect the forest. So if you fly over that area now, you won't see bare hills, they're not there anymore, there's trees. And we've even used some of this modern technology you were talking about to get high resolution maps. We're working with Esri, Digital Globe, Google Earth, and now NASA. I suppose the NASA part will probably get cut, won't it? But anyway, we have been working with NASA. And so the villagers now see these high resolution maps. They know where they can grow the trees. There are forest monitors from each of the 52 villages, volunteers, go to workshops, learn how to use these iTablets and smartphones, go into their forests, and if they see an illegally felled tree or an animal trap or a bullet on the ground, or on the positive side, a chimp nest or sighting of a leopard or something, then they press little buttons and get little photos, and it all gets uploaded onto a platform in the clouds called Global Forest Watch, which can be then downloaded and decision makers can see what's going on. It's funny, when I grew up, clouds produced rain. They now seem to produce data.
Hi, Jane. Gary Nell from National Geographic. So you're our permanent hero. Why is the rat here, number one? And secondly, could you talk about the role of zoos and aquariums and where they fit into the future for saving wildlife?
Let me start with rats. This rat was actually given to me by a group called Doctors Against Animal Experimentation. There are many, many very, very deep scientific, careful meetings going on right now about whether animals are indeed needed or actually pushing things back. And he was given to me by this group, but I use him talking about animal intelligence and in the future, and how this is the best time for any young person wanting to learn about animal behavior, because science has finally opened its mind. It's got out of the box, and it's admitting intelligence, not just in chimpanzees, orangutans, elephants, whales, and so on, but these guys, and I'm counting him, it's called Ratty, as a giant forest rat, and they're being trained, and they have successfully sniffed out unexploded landmines in Cambodia and Mozambique. They're also able to sniff the earliest signs of TB from sputum before the machines. And finally, they're now being taught to smell out ivory, rhino horn, pangolin scales, and they can go up in among the containers, you know, in the ports and the airports, and sniff everything out. And I've watched them being trained, and they're adorable creatures. So that's why I have Ratty. Zoos and aquariums, well, they're getting better and better. I think there are some animals that should not be in zoos. Elephants, unless they have a huge area to roam. Wolves too. Certainly dolphins and whales. They need the open sea. They can never have a good life in a space. But you know, some zoos are certainly doing a great job in educating people, and there is something for a child to actually go and be close to an animal and smell it and look into its eyes, which they can't quite get from television, however good the television is. And they're also doing a lot for conservation, captive breeding, and more zoos are sending money for conservation programs in other parts of the world.
I've seen. Oh, sorry. Elise Nelson. I'm president and CEO of Vital Voices. We work with women leaders around the world. A number of them have followed in your footsteps. I just wondered if you could speak a little bit to a trend that we've seen growing recently, and maybe it's just that we're seeing it's growing, but it's always been there. And that's wherever you see devastation, environmental devastation, you see a real rise of violence against women.
Of what?
Violence against women.
I haven't noticed that that's particularly where we've destroyed the environment. I mean, I suppose if you take the inner city and crowded conditions in cities, certainly a lot of violence against women there. And the extent to which that's always gone on, I don't know, but there are many animals who are extremely violent to their women, to their females. You know, I was just in Nebraska for the migration of the sandhill cranes, which is one of the amazing sights in the world if you haven't seen it. And the pintail ducks were there, and it was their courtship. So, I mean, it's absolutely brutal. One female has about 9 suitors, and she's flying and trying to get away, and eventually she dives down to the water, and all of them then fight, and the one who wins pushes her head under the water and mates her. It's brutal. It really is. But I suppose it's evolved for some special reason. But there is quite a lot of violence in sexual behavior in quite a lot of animal species. But I mean, the biggest difference between us and the other animals, including the chimps, is this explosive development of our intellect. So how is it possible that the most intellectual being to ever walk the planet is destroying its only home? And I think there's a disconnect between this clever head and the human heart, love and compassion, which comes right back to where you began, really. So I really believe that only when head and heart work in harmony with each other can we achieve our true human potential. And if we have head and heart in harmony and education, then this violence against women should stop. And as women become empowered, which is why in our Tukari program, you know, working with women, providing scholarships to keep girls in school after puberty. It's been shown all around the world that as women's education rises, family size tends to drop. And you know, violence will always occur when people are fighting over scarce resources. That's why what's happening to our water is so terrifying. Freshwater supplies dwindling, the deep aquifers being drained for agricultural agriculture because they're dry, desert-like. So water is stolen and sprayed out on the fields. And you know, this can't go on forever. And I would love one day to have a conference of some of the top economists and have a discussion about unlimited economic growth on a planet of finite resources. Because the first thing that happens when there's a depression is the government tells you, go out and buy. You've got to build up the, you know, you must go and buy. And yet my message always is, we've become such a wasteful society. Do we need everything that we buy? So how do we resolve this? I have no idea. I'm not an economist, but I would love to have a real deep discussion about that. We don't. That is for sure. That's definite. But what about the governments and the economists that tell us the only way to build up the economy is when people buy more? That's the question.
Well, the question
Exactly.
Hi, I'm Ross Eisenbray from the Economic Policy Institute. We're all aware of what the Trump administration is doing. As you have traveled around the world, is there a government that you hold up as a model for how they're dealing with science, with ecology, with all of the issues you've been talking about here?
Well, I think Trudeau is doing a very good job in Canada. Germany seems to be still hanging in there with Angela Merkel. I really admire her and her stand for the immigrants. But there's an awful lot of countries where everything seems to be going wrong or be collapsing, and dictatorship is on the rise again in Africa. And so, as I'm not a politician or an economist, I haven't studied all of this, but it is rare to be in a country where everybody is happy with the way things are going. Programs, well, environmental ones, yes, but what happens is that one president and his administration will build up a lot of environmental protections, like Obama and Clinton before him. And then with one stroke of a pen, you can turn it all upside down and wipe it out. So as long as we can have individual people and their parties destroying what has been so hardly fought for, it's tragic. Today, yes, this very day, in the EPA, I know, it's terrifying.
Thank you. I'm Janet Langhart Cohen, and I just want to say what an honor it is to be in your presence. Thank you for all that you do. And before I ask you a question, David, I have to say to you, last night on Lawrence O'Donnell, you talked about the ethology of Washington, and you said it just right. So thank you for that. Dr. Goodall, you talked about the matriarch and the chimpanzee flow, and you also spoke about your having a son. And I wondered if you, using the word ethology, if you noticed anything in your natural rearing and emotional connection to your son that was parallel to what maybe Flo showed in the loving of her offspring?
Yes, indeed. And I found in Chimp Society there are good mothers and less good mothers, and one or two bad mothers. But mostly the bad mothers are only because their mothers died when they were young and they never had the chance to learn by interacting with siblings. But the good mother is protective but not overprotective. She is affectionate, she's playful, and above all supportive. And all of those things I found in my mother. I was very lucky in my mother. Without her, I might not have done what I've done. And Flo showed all of those same qualities as my mother that I tried to show with my son. And he was originally Grublin, and it was a silly name. It was just, he was the same. Well, no, he and a little chimp called Goblin were the same age, and both of them were very messy eaters. And so I called the little chimp Goblin Grub, and then my son became Grublin Gob. And then the Grublin part left, became Grub. So it was a silly thing. And I had no idea it would stick, but he's still called Grub by everybody. But anyway, the thing that I think was most important that I learned from the chimps is, and the first people who were really interested in my scientific results were not the animal behavior people. It was the child psychologists and psychiatrists like John Bowlby and Rene Spitz. And so, they were interested in orphans and depression. We've studied that in the chimpanzees, and the importance of having up to 3 adults around them when they're in the first 2 years, who are there for them and who are supportive, even if it's not the natural mother.
Hi, Stuart Patrick from the Council on Foreign Relations, and I had the good fortune in 1987-88 to spend a couple of summers in Olduvai Gorge, and I actually met Grub one day when he was with Hugo van Lauwijk, I guess. Yeah. So anyway, but my question is really about when you discovered the chimpanzee's capacity for intraspecies violence. Was that a shock to you? And how do you compare it to your insights of how bonobo life is? Are there other differences amongst them? And did it change your sort of view of chimpanzees in a sense as inherently peaceful?
I was absolutely shocked when I realized that, like us, chimpanzees have a dark side. Loving, compassionate, caring, altruistic, yes, like us, but they can also be extremely brutal and violent. Mostly we see it in the interactions between individuals of neighboring communities, and groups of males will patrol a territory, and if they see 1 or 2 individuals from the neighboring group, they will chase, and if they catch that unfortunate individual, he or she is likely to die of wounds inflicted. They're really brutal gang attacks, and it was shocking. And when I first observed this, and some of the students observed it too, and it was at a time when aggression in humans was extremely politically sensitive subject, and nobody was talking, or I wasn't supposed to talk about the fact that chimpanzees were innately violent, because maybe that meant that aggression was part of our primate heritage, which I believe it is. At the same time, I believe our brains have evolved to a time when we can control our behavior, and most of the time we do. But it was so bad that when there was a conference in Paris on aggression in humans, was it innate or was it learned? And there was a Russian there. It was right at the beginning when a few Russians were allowed out at the end of the Cold War. And every time he wanted to say something, he first had to go and telephone to Moscow to find out if it was okay to say it. And a professor from Cambridge was standing up and talking about the fact that all aggression is learned. And he studied primates. And afterwards, I went over to him and I said, "Do you really believe that?" And he said, "Jane, I'd rather not talk about what I really believe." That's how bad it was. Oh, you asked about bonobos. Wait a minute.
Oh, bonobos.
You asked about
Sorry.
bonobos.
Sorry.
For those of you who don't know, bonobos used to be called pygmy chimpanzees. And they are less aggressive, although they can be more aggressive than people think. And they are very good at resolving conflicts. Are there lessons there for us? Well, bonobos solve their conflicts mostly through sex. And I'm not sure that that's the way we want. But I'm afraid I did say the other day, although I think President Trump might rather enjoy it.
I didn't think we were going there, but Alan is representing for the back.
I'm Alan Fleischman from Laurel Strategies, and I have the great pleasure of serving on Jane's board of the Jane Goodall Institute. And one of the things that we are most proud of, Jane, is that through your inspiration and what you've done around hope, we now have Roots and Shoots programs in 160 countries around the world. Can you explain a little bit how that started, what it means, and any kind of story that would just highlight the extraordinary vitality of our young people globally?
I think that the Roots and Shoots program has been so successful because it's youth driven, and the young people get to choose to do projects that they are passionate about. And it doesn't mean every child in the group has to do all three: animals, people, environment, but between them they do. And then they listen to each other's projects. And so they begin to see how all of these things are interconnected. You know, this holistic approach, which we've used in Dakari, is so important for young people to realize, like when we want to help girls to stay in school after puberty, you realize that that means you have to provide hygienic latrines and sanitary supplies, because otherwise they won't go to school. There's no privacy and things like that. So the Roots and Shoots program, I would say, an example which I feel is at the moment I'm feeling this is a really exciting example, as in China. I began developing this program in China in 1993, soon after it began. And it spread quite rapidly through China. Today there's about 2,000 groups across China. But this last time, when I was in China just before Christmas, there were people, I don't know why, but there were so many people coming up to me in Chengdu, Shanghai, Beijing, saying, well, of course we do care about the environment now because we were in Roots and Shoots in primary school. And a lot of them were saying, well, we love animals because we watched your geographic documentaries when we were in primary school. And I've been watching the change in attitude towards the environment and animals gradually improving over the years since I've been going. And there is a whole new attitude in China that is very, very obvious. There's a film called The Ivory Game, and if you haven't seen it, you can see it through Netflix. And in The Ivory Game, it's about ivory trading, of course. And there's no gruesome scenes of elephants being shot. It's the trading, and it takes you all over China and Vietnam. And I don't know how many of you in this room know that the second largest importer of illegal ivory is the United States. Anyway, in this film, there's a young man, and when he was a little boy, he used to walk past markets to his school, see the way animals were treated, and feel very sorry for them. And he promised that he would grow up and help them, and he became a journalist. And when this film, Ivory Game, was being made, somehow he got in contact with the producer and director of the movie and agreed to go as an undercover buyer. And it's this movie is high drama. It's like an action thriller. And he goes in and you actually see what goes on in this dealer's shop. And I won't tell you because you have to go and see it yourself. It's very exciting. And so afterwards, when he's asked, well, this is very dangerous what you're doing. Why are you doing it? And he said, I'm doing it because I want to be the voice for the millions of Chinese today who feel just like you do. But the Chinese have this bad name of, they're destroying everything. China is doing a lot of destruction, but so have we. Find me a developed country that hasn't harmed the environment as it became more economically successful. And China just does it, it's very damaging in places outside China. They're going outside China, as we did, to protect the environment in China. And they're doing it because they're very good at it, and there's a lot of them. But they're not doing anything worse than we did. And now they are beginning to change. And this young man, we call him Hong, he's working with our institute in Tanzania, in Uganda, in DRC, to work with the Chinese communities through the Chinese ambassadors to educate the people who were sent out to build roads and dams about the environment, because nobody's ever talked to them like that before. And they change. So I think Roots and Shoots has helped to change the attitude of a country like China emerging as, one of the top. Well, I actually believe that right now, because of this administration, if China so wished, China could take the lead in admitting the harm it's done to the environment, but taking the lead in moving in a new direction. And they're way ahead in solar energy, for example. Exactly.
I believe it was just a few weeks ago.
By the end of this year, there will be no more ivory. That's internal as well as external. And people say to me, oh, but that's just, that they just signed a bit of paper. They don't really mean. And I would bet quite a lot of money on the fact that that ban will have a huge effect in China.
Thank you. My name's Heidi Ruffler. I had the privilege of volunteering with you at Kigoma Wildlife Weeks and also in Germany at a nature youth summit in 1989, so a long time ago. And it was hugely influential. I now work at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in the International Affairs program focused on Africa communications. So thank you to you for helping me to guide my career at that early age. I wanted to just speak a bit more about the current state of affairs here. We know that things can change at the stroke of a pen, but we also have seen this now kind of unleashing of hatred among our fellow citizens. I know this is broader than the topic that you came here to talk about today, but what are your recommendations for that? How can we sort of help to reach out to people? We seem such a divided nation right now, sort of heal things internally and try to make things better for wildlife and also for people.
Well, I'm working extra hard. I said from the beginning when Trump was elected that now, there's no good going head on. We can't do anything that way. So those of us who care passionately are going to have to get more and more together and work around and try and maintain, some of the steps that are being taken in the right direction. Try and not let everything be destroyed. And I think one thing that's come as a result of this, which is highly encouraging, is that so many people who were apathetic before have become, determined to try and do something. That you see that in all these marches. And a good sign there is that the marches are not violent. And so somehow this is the time we need to use these brains. We have these very clever brains, and we can use them to have discussions like we're having today. So we can bring people together from different fields with different experience. And this is the time we need to prove that we can find a way to get ourselves out of the mess that we're in now without fighting, without violence. And, I've seen some such lovely signs. I don't know who it was who was brave enough to climb onto the Statue of Liberty and put welcome migrants or immigrants. There's so many things like that happening. And so pushing to develop our youth program more and more is something I feel very strongly about, because we bring the young people together. And they, for example, just one example, we brought together some young people from Israel and Palestine. At first, they wouldn't talk to each other. And by the end of this 4-day meeting, I don't think they left I think they stayed together all night. These were 19, 20-year-olds. So if you get young people to understand, then I think that's a great hope for the future. If you hadn't asked, I would have brought him up anyway. This is, some of you, well, actually, on this picture here, you can see him. Mr. H is 25 years old, and I have 5 reasons for hope. One of them I've talked about is this human brain. It's capable of destruction, but also think of what we are developing, like your clean green energy. Once we're, up against it, we can use our brains to try and get out of the mess we're made. So that's one. Perhaps the most important of all is the energy commitment of young people once they understand and are empowered to take action. Everywhere I go around the world, there are young people with shining eyes wanting to tell Dr. Jane what they've been doing to make this a better world. The third one is the resilience of nature. And I've already talked about the trees that came back around Gombe, and animals on the brink of extinction can be given another chance when people are dedicated and care. That social media that can be used damagingly, as we know, but it can bring together people from far away around a single issue, like the largest gathering of humans on the planet around a single issue was one of the climate marches that went on in major cities around the world. I think it was one of Al Gore's. And finally, and that's where Mr. H comes in, the indomitable human spirit, the people we know who tackle the impossible and won't give up, people who are icons like Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King, people who suffer the most terrible disabilities, and yet they're out there inspiring all those around them. I just spent time with a Canadian who was born with no legs and arms that ended above the elbow, no hands, and he goes around on a skateboard. He's one of the most dynamic, fun individuals, and he goes around the world. And, I spent 2 hours with him just last week in Los Angeles. He's amazing. And then Mr. H was given to me 25 years ago for my birthday, so it makes him almost exactly 25. And this man was in the US Marines, and he went blind when he was 21. And he decided to become a magician. And everybody said, but Gary, you can't be a good magician if you're blind. He said, I can try. And he's so good, the children don't know he's blind, and then he'll tell them, and he'll say, something bad may happen in your life, because we never know, but if it does, don't give up. There's always a way forward. And he does scuba diving, cross-country skiing, skydiving, and he's just produced a book which you can get on Amazon. It's the only way to get it. It's called Blind Artist. His name is Gary Horn, Haun, and he gave me this thinking it was a chimp, and I made him hold the tail. He said, never mind, take him with you, and you know my spirit's with you. Think of a man who's totally blind, teaching himself to paint. And he's done a portrait of Mr. H just from feeling him, never saw him. It hangs in my office in Virginia. So he's an amazing man, and though Mr. H has now been with me to 63 countries. But before you conclude it, could I want to acknowledge, thank you to all my people who are here from the Jane Goodall Institute, without whom I couldn't do any of what I do. And there's Susanna here in the front. And then, of course, David Shears moved. He just left. Yes, well, he's not well. And then at the back, there's Anna Gibson, there's Christopher, and there's Sean. Just stand up and wave, because without this team, I could not do what I do.
Well, they have. Qualities we typically associate with spirit, soul, quality, compassion. No one has ever sat in a room and talked about how machine-made create artificial compassion. We had a focus on it. But in focus on this, to get it seems to me that the distinction here between structured behavior, positive behavior, is not linked to intelligence. There are heroes like you who are out there delivering this message in country after country, 63 of them participate, but in country after country, who are changing perspectives and reminding us of what our real priorities are and what are the real some of the forces that produce positive change. For all of us. Thank you all. I'm sure some of you may want to come up here and say something to Jane. If I could just ask her for a couple of pictures we want to take with her.
Ekale